we are going to talk now about youth leadership. This is so important. Plenary 2, youth leadership and movement building, because our work depends on empowering future leaders, but also not empowering future leaders, hearing what they have to say, because we're no longer in a world where we're speaking to young people. We want to talk to them. We want to empower them. We want to hear how they see the world, what ideas they have, because there's so much that we can learn from them. Now, the dialogue will center young people's issues and activism and really examine the role of youth-led movements in facing up to the challenges of the world today. It is entirely shaped by and consists of youth voices from different movements. Young leaders will share their reflections on this. It's a pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Tivia Collins. Tivia is a PhD candidate at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of West Indies, and her research actually examines lived experiences of Guyanese migrant women in Trinidad and Tobago within an intra-regional context, and also research assistant and is editorial assistant for the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. Tivia, we can't wait to hear from your panel. Take it away.
Greetings, hello everyone, and welcome to the youth plenary session. Everyone is hearing me clearly?
Yep.
Okay, great. We are very excited today to share with you speakers from across the globe, all young people who are going to share their views on terms of youth leadership and all of the work that they do with their NGOs and community organizing. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just want us to get straight into the questions that we have for these 6 amazing young people today. But first, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So let's begin with Ashlee. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good day from wherever you are in the world. I am Ashlee Burnett, and I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I am a 2020 Woman Deliver Young Leader. And I recently started my own NGO called Feminitt, which is an intersectional Caribbean feminist organization that uses social good, education, and a conversation to advance gender equality in the Caribbean. And I currently serve as the chair for the Caribbean Women in Leadership Trinidad and Tobago National Chapter. I'm very, very happy to be here today and join this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ashlee. Cesar?
Buenos días a todos y todas. Soy César. Soy peruano, pero vivo en Chile. Soy un inmigrante peruano en Chile. Trabajo para la Asamblea Antipatriarcal de Varones de Santiago. Nuestros temas de interés son, por supuesto, el género, nuestra lucha contra el capitalismo, el patriarcado y el adultocentrismo. Estoy muy feliz de trabajar en este simposio con todos y todas hoy día y estoy ansioso de que empiece.
Gracias, Cesar. Now we head to Martin.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Martin, he, him, and I'm chair of the Youth Steering Committee at ILGA World, which is the International LGBTI Federation for Organizations. I'm also SDG Young Leader, and also I'm a commissioner to the high-level commission of ICPD 25 follow-up. And I'm really looking forward to joining you today.
Thank you so much. Abel, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Abel Koka. I'm from Tanzania, and I'm working with Restless Development Tanzania as a program coordinator, where I'm leading youth-led accountability programs on gender equality and family planning. But also I'm the member of the Generation Equality Youth Task Force under UN Women, where we are advising UN Women and mobilizing young people through the Generation Equality Forum and campaign at large. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to contribute to the discussion and learning from you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abel. And finally, we have Sohan. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I am Sonia Roman. I am the Chief Executive of Bangladesh Model Youth Parliament, and I am currently working with SRSR for All, a project of Engagement and Voice Network Bangladesh. but I am passionate about climate justice. And I am the founding member of Fridays for Future movement, founded by Greta Thunberg. Very excited to part of this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sohan. All right, so you all have been introduced to this amazing young panel, and I see there are 92 attendees right now in Zoom. And so we're gonna get straight started into this session. And our first question is for Ashlee. Now, Ashlee, a lot of us are aware, and some of us may not be, but you formed your organization, Feminitt, that you just told us about. And you've stated openly that you felt that there was a need for this within Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to ask you to get the ball rolling in terms of feminist movement building and youth leadership within the world. How do you think the feminist movement benefits when youth leaders take the reins and create their own organizations to do activism? And in addition to that, bear with me, I want to know, what is the value in this type of youth leadership, and is there any backlash?
Right. Thank you so much for that question. So for a brief background on Feminitt and how we started, I realized that there were a lot of feminist spaces within Trinidad and Tobago, but a lot of them were either, inaccessible in the ways of the language that were being used at the events. It was something that you could not really connect to. And the average person couldn't really understand. I myself had problems even understanding what was happening in these spaces. They were also too expensive. And so imagine having an event that tells you how you can deal with gender-based violence and how you can escape it. And it's costing a lot. So the average person can't afford it. I became involved in the movements through volunteering because I couldn't afford, attending. And, that created that barrier. They were also very, very exclusionary. So only, the typical type of woman were invited to those events or were on panels. And I realized that, trying to push back and advocate for there to be a more inclusive space was something that it was like pulling teeth. It was super, super hard. And so I said, you know what? I never thought I would have ever started an organization. But then Feminitt, I started Feminitt to be able to bridge that gap, to be that inclusive space, to be accessible, to be that education hub for persons to be able to be a part of. And, I wouldn't say like we've taken the reins. I'd say we kind of joining on the ride to ensure that there's continuity, to open a space for more inclusion, because, we're no longer we never were a homogenous society, but youth-led organizations, we have the opportunity to reach various groups, to be able to, access mentorship from the older heads, because, it's an important thing that I have grown to know. And I really appreciate is that intergenerational conversation, and to understand that we stand on the shoulders of so many feminists here within the Caribbean, like Peggy Antrobus and Hazel Brown and Roberta Clark and all of these lovely persons I'm sure a couple of us may know of, and it really helps for us to be able to benefit from that. The space benefits from having that continuity, and to, look at different types of activism, because a lot of youth NGOs, they focus a lot on online activism, which has actually proved to be a very, very beneficial space, because there are different people that you can reach there. And then there's also the grassroots movements that are able to reach those on the ground. And so the backlash from that has been a lot, simply because a lot of people believe that youth, we don't know things, and we just tick a box on that inclusion, and we have youth being a part of the conversation, but not, persons not listening. And so that backlash has come also in us. The kind of things that we advocate for in being progressive has gotten a lot of pushback, because we believe that human rights are for all, but of course there are older heads that believes that it's supposed to be homogenous.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ashlee. And actually, right now, I heard that there was a bit of a mix-up, and Ange Marie is actually live right now with us in Rwanda. So Ange Marie, can you hear us clearly? I'd ask you to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm alive. Yes. I'm Ange Yvette Nyiransabimana, the Rwanda MenEngage Network Youth Coordinator, and I actually work as the Youth Engagement Program Coordinator in the Rwanda Citizen Voice and Actions. And I'm
Thank you.
Here to share my ideas.
Great, thank you so much, Ange-Marie. And actually, I'm going to put you on the spot today. I'm going to ask you the next question since we have you here. And what I want to know from you, you're in Rwanda right now, you're live with us, you have particular experiences working on community organizing, working with the MenEngage team, etc. What we want to know is, what does youth leadership mean to you? And how do we encourage other young people to get involved in movement building?
Yes, I'll first begin with our Rwandan slogan, which says, Urubyiruko ni imbaraga z'igihugu zubaka kandi vuba. In short words, the youth are the country working force, which builds the country in a quick way and in an effective manner. That's the first thing I just want to mention. And to me, you as leadership is the ability to influence people towards achieving a common goal. Youth leadership is that leadership which is effective, which is inclusive, leaving none behind, including women and young people. And also youth leadership also is that leadership which is effective and efficient, which uses the resources they have and achieve higher. And I think that's what youth leadership means to me. And you're asking me, what can we do to encourage other young people to be involved in movement building through volunteerism and education? First, the first problem we have is that these masculinity theories and this, it is rooted in our cultures. Then the first thing you have to do is to change mind of old people or our parents that we live with. Then that's the first step. And in Rwanda, we have a best practice which called Umugoroba w'Ababyeyi, parents dialogue. They meet, they discuss about issues that are affecting the society. And I think all over the world is the first step that we can do, put parents together, discuss with them with positive masculinities, and give them knowledge about gender equality. After that, we go to primary education. Why can't we not include a course on gender equality? And students begin at the root, knowing what positive masculinities are and giving them a good understanding of gender equality. And what if also we build clubs or movements in the higher learning educations and universities about gender equality, though many of them are not interested about extracurricular activities. And that's why I can recommend that the government can introduce a course, a module on gender equality, neither being in social sciences, in STEM courses, or engineering courses. Because when we leave these STEM students behind and we say that they can go in social sciences, I think we can be leaving a good number of young people without that knowledge of gender equality. And the other thing that we can do, we can provide space for young people where their ideas can be heard and where also we can be empowered through trainings and workshops. And we can organize awareness campaigns on local level in sectors or the municipalities in the countries abroad where the young people are taught about gender equality. And most lastly, but which is valuable, I can say that these movements working on challenging masculinities or promoting gender equality, they can provide volunteering opportunities to young people who want to improve their knowledge on gender equality and promoting positive masculinities. Thank you.
Ange-Marie, Thank you so much. Those were some seriously powerful suggestions and recommendations on your end. And we take them, of course, and we're registering them, and a team in MenEngage, of course, is doing a lot of this work as well. So I want us to move from Rwanda, and I want us to head down to South America in Santiago, Chile. And I want to talk to now Cesar. Now, Cesar, a lot of the work that you do, following up from Ange Marie in terms of understanding men and masculinity and the role that plays with youth and young people. Your work, specifically, you do work with the Anti-Patriarchal Assembly of Men in Santiago. Now, I want to know a bit more about this community, this organization, and I also want you to share with us, what do you think, based upon this work, are the benefits of youth leadership that emerges organically? And how can we continue to encourage male activists to be accountable allies to the feminist movement? Cesar, go ahead.
Muchas gracias. De nuevo, hola a todos y todas. Nosotros trabajamos en la Asamblea Antipatriarcal y quiero dejar en claro que tenemos una perspectiva antipatriarcal porque creemos que el antipatriarcado es algo por construir en conjunto. Y en ese momento específico de la historia, los hombres y las masculinidades son quienes tienen que hacerse cargo de terminar con el patriarcado. Eso por un punto. Nosotros trabajamos hace 3 años aproximadamente, y es un trabajo que viene ligado al trabajo que se estuvo haciendo en Latinoamérica con los encuentros latinoamericanos de varones antipatriarcales. En ese sentido, muchos jóvenes de diferentes países de Latinoamérica, o sea, Sudamérica específicamente, nos juntábamos a comentar los problemas que identificábamos en la masculinidad, en un mandato masculino en el ser hombre y el malestar que producía en nosotros ese mandato. Creo que actualmente construir una división, o sea, construir una educación con división de género, que es lo que comentaba Ange Marie y que existe, termina siendo nocivo para la construcción de una perspectiva de inclusión de hombres y mujeres. Nosotros creemos que tenemos que reconocer que existe la división de género entre hombres y mujeres, para a partir de eso poder decir que los hombres somos los beneficiados de este sistema patriarcal y somos quien tenemos que ayudar a terminar con eso. ¿Cómo afecta esto a los nuevos líderes y a la juventud? Creemos que la juventud específicamente es la que se está haciendo cargo de todo esto. Por ejemplo, el caso específico chileno, somos herederos de una juventud transformadora y revolucionaria desde el retorno a la democracia, el 2006 y el 2011 con los movimientos estudiantiles, y el año pasado fueron ellos quienes impulsaron la revolución de octubre. Creemos que somos agentes de cambio transformadores y por lo mismo tenemos que hacernos cargo de las demandas que ya plantearon los movimientos feministas y ahora en las masculinidades terminar con el patriarcado. Respecto a los liderazgos, desde nuestra perspectiva, somos bastante críticos con la idea de que los hombres asuman los liderazgos por todo lo que mencioné recientemente. Hay un trabajo de construcción, primero, y segundo, de poder llevar estos temas a la discusión pública. Por lo menos, desde nuestros espacios creemos que tenemos que dar espacio a la voz de masculinidades disidentes, entre ellas las masculinidades LGTBIQ+, y especialmente las mujeres. Eso.
Thank you so much, Cesar. That is interesting work in terms of how we understand transforming youth and the movement that happened within your area. And of course, working within LGBT communities, which ties directly into the question I have for Martin. So Marta, I'm going to invite you now to speak. And we know that your work focuses mainly on LGBTQ rights internationally. And what I want to know from you is, what does meaningful youth engagement and youth leadership look like, especially for you as an LGBTQI plus activist? And what kind of allyship do you think is necessary for the feminist movement to work?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, and I will just go just one step back as well before that question. Is that I think when we came into this role as well as a chair of the Youth Steering Committee, it was quite apparent that LGBTIQ youth issues are too often sidelined on global level, and young queer people are often invisible from other movements. There are multiple harmful practices, such as like sterilization requirements or conversion therapies, or surgeries on intersex people, or violence against LGBTI women, that are often left out from the global harmful practices, or any conversation on bodily autonomy or SRHR. So that challenge was already apparent there, and these issues were deemed as too political, too controversial to be addressed in those spaces. And we're often left out of any decision making, really, and that impacts our lives as queer young people. There are multiple barriers for our meaningful participation, really. That is the lack of strong queer youth civil society infrastructure, and the tokenism, just ticking the box of queer young people being part of it, and also the risk of safety, really, for young people being outed and putting their lives at risk, being involved as queer young people in leadership roles as well. So these are kind of key issues that we need to take into account as barriers for this. But meaningful youth participation of queer young people is more important than ever, because COVID has further isolated and marginalized our communities. We need to invest in meaningful participation and leadership at all levels, from design and implementation and delivery, at all levels of our work. It is about really recognizing the diversity within our movement, and that we have specific needs and challenges even within the LGBTIQ movement. It is about recognizing privileges within our movement as well, and giving space of our own diverse communities to speak on the issues that impact them. Too often, all of our identities are bulked up together, and they come like just mentioned as a whole, but not going into depth of our community's needs and issues. And far often too, our spaces are dominated by cis-gendered, gay, white, middle-aged men, and understanding the uniqueness of our experiences and different challenges and struggles and harmful practices that different identities face is a really crucial aspect of this. At the ILGA Youth Steering Committee, we've been working together with diverse queer youth organizations across the world to set up a new global queer youth network infrastructure that represents our movement and takes ownership of queer youth issues on global level in different spaces. As queer feminists, we're also working with other youth movements such as SRHR youth organizations to merge the gaps between us, because this is more important than ever. Some are part of other networks, some of them are part of our networks, and we run events together as well. To be a great ally, as you mentioned, as a feminist movement, you can listen to the diverse queer experiences of our communities, and particularly lesbian, bi, trans, and intersex women and gender diverse people. It's about moving away from binary language and creating just an affirming and respectful environment, celebrating our diversity and recognizing our intersecting struggles. Because our existence and our identities are not up for debate and not up for discussion. We don't need another space nurturing a climate that's toxic for our communities. Feminist movements should expand the tent, bring LGBTI women and gender diverse people, and because they often feel left out from SRHR. It's about speaking about queer youth within your work, whether you talk about bodily autonomy, women's rights, or any other issues. Normalize and mainstream queer youth issues. have a focus on unique challenges of trans, gender diverse people addressed by them and the importance of working together, and give space to include in the decision-making and conversations queer young women and gender diverse people need to be involved at that decision-making at all levels. And I want to finally say that in order to be a true ally is to present the queer youth as the key change makers as communities, crucial for achieving all international frameworks, whether it's the Program of Action, Beijing +25, ICPD +25, because we are crucial to change those days. And works the other way around as well. We as queer movements, we need to step up and need to speak about reproductive justice, and we need to get involved. Youth movements also show us what the future looks like, and that's what we need to do, is work together and be a true allies for our own and each other's movements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. You raised some very key points there, particularly around including youth in all of the conversations, but also ensuring particularly LGBTI youth are, create space as well to talk about reproductive justice and other challenges that young people face around the world. And continuing along that conversation, Abel, I want to invite you in. You're a young lawyer, and you advocate a lot for dealing with issues within the gender equality campaign, a campaign that calls for equal pay, sharing of unpaid labor, and ending violence against women. And we know this call, of course, cannot happen, and this is very similar to Martin's point, this call cannot happen without changing toxic masculinity within our societies. So do you think it is important to involve young leaders in the work of engaging men and boys for gender justice? And if so, of course, why?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I agree with you that it's important to engage young leaders in this process of bridging the gender gap in the community, because gender equality is not an issue of women and girls only. It is the fight for the development of the community. So men and boys, as women and girls, are duty-bound to join forces, because we all benefit when women and girls have the same opportunities but equal rights as men and boys. However, with my experience working in the community, looking at the community now, most of the gender equality programs and intervention are intended in supporting women and girls' empowerment and leaving men and boys behind, which is making it very hard to dismantle the gender structure which is discriminating against women and girls. And the problem we have in the community now is that boys and men are raised in the patriarchy system, where they are given power, voice, and control over resources, whereas women and girls are raised in an empowerment system whereby they are taught that you should be submissive, you should be under the control of men, and you should be inferior to men. And this is keeping on widening the gender gap. But if we want to achieve the gender equality in the community, we must see the importance of engaging men and boys, because the world today exists in the balance of the two gender. Men cannot exist in exclusion of women. Otherwise, women cannot exist in the exclusion of men. We depend on one another in pushing the boundaries and creating a better world for all. It's obvious that we cannot no longer afford to have a single voice in the fight for gender equality, because gender itself as a concept, it does not mean women only. It's both men and women. It's both boys and girls. And in order to change this narrative, as it has been said by other speakers, is that we must invest in teaching young boys and girls in and out of the schools about gender equity, and making sure that the gender tenet is understood by them, but also they are living it. As coming from the CSOs, public sectors and private sector, we should all take deliberate steps to educate men about gender equality and equity, in the business, private sector, workspace, but also in the public life at large. Because by doing so, we will have a community whereby men and boys respect the position of women in the community, but also their critical role in advancing the development agenda. And for instance, in our community now, a man can wake up in the morning and decide that I'm going to be a political leader, or I'm going to do this and that in the community. But for women, it's very different, because for women, they have to consult, if they're married, they have to consult their husband, their in-laws, and the whole family, and even the community at large for endorsement. But this is different to men. And why we are here now, it's because men and boys are lagging behind in supporting some of the equality movement in the community. Nevertheless, we have unfinished the business of making the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action a reality, as mentioned by Martin. And it is now 5 years since its adoption, but we are still living in a world where women and girls are facing multiple challenges and surrounded by unbearable risks such as gender-based violence, economic independence and hardship, lack of representation in the political spheres and decision-making spaces, but also we have recurring child marriages and adolescent pregnancies, which are robbing away the chance of girls to grow, learn, and succeed in the community. But also there is lack of access to education and sexual reproductive health and rights. And all these are threatening the well-being of women and girls in the community. But despite of all odds, there is opportunity. And our biggest opportunity now in order to achieve gender equality is by leveraging the young generation, by shifting the baton from youth engagement to youth participation. Because now the tendency we have in the community now, young people are taken as mere beneficiaries of some of the intervention, gender equality intervention happening in the community, and not key stakeholders. So they are like the end product from different discussion are taken to young people, but they are not involved in the designing, implementation, monitoring, and reviewing of how gender equality policies are implemented in the community. And why should we engage young people? We should engage young people because it has been said that Africa, for instance, Africa is one of the youngest continents in the world, with more than 60% of the population, it's youth. But these young people have the power. They have the power to push for accountability, but also to challenge and change the social norms discriminating women and girls in the community. But also young people have the voice. The voice of young people can be used to call for action, but also to hold their decision makers into account in order to make their policy commitment into reality. But another point is that why we should engage young people is that young people are the leaders of today and tomorrow. They should be supported to back gender equality and women empowerment to its full achievement. Young people in their majority, if they are given a seat at the table, they can bring the realities of gender inequalities around there and propose sustainable solution to their achievement. For instance, at Restless Development, where I'm working now, I'm leading the implementation of the Youth-Led Accountability on Gender Equality and Family Planning project. And here we have built the capacity of more than 3,000 young people to conduct data-driven accountability. And the moment we built their capacity and they discovered their leadership ability and we were able to amplify their voice, young people now are demanding for the access to improve the youth-friendly productive services in the community. And we all know that among the challenges why we have recurring child marriages in teenage pregnancies, it's because of the lack of access to sexual reproductive health and rights. But now we have like a mother and protection committees established in the community because of the call of action from young people. So I will call upon all stakeholders from both private and public sector, CSOs, non-government organizations, to see the need to invest in programs which will unleash the power of young people, amplify their voice, but also nurture their leadership ability in order for them to stand at the front and center of making gender equality a reality. And in summing up, it has been said, and I have to repeat this, that the struggle for equality may be seen as a long way ahead. It may be seen as a long journey ahead, but with the young generation on board, the realization of gender equality is time-bound and it's a reality. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Abel. So I really do appreciate a lot of the comments you made in terms of how young people should take up the reins and continue to participate. And I like the use of your word participate instead of youth engagement, because participation implies we are actively involved in something more than anything else. So I do appreciate that. And as we head to our last youth speaker for today, I just want to encourage those of you who are on. I see there are 129 attendees, and of course, many of you are joining live from around the world as well. If you have questions for the panelists, do feel free to put them in the chat, so that everyone can, get the questions. If you have for a specific panelist, that's also fine. Put them in the chat and we're gonna ask them in the next segment. So before we move on to that, I wanna invite Sohan. Sohan, I know that, a lot of the work that you do is based on climate change and climate resilience in Bangladesh. Now, climate change and issues around climate change and climate resilience are very topical conversations right now, not only because, it's click-worthy, as some young people say, but because it literally affects the future and the present that the generations to come, including us, are going to inherit. So based upon what Abel spoke about in terms of youth participation and the challenges that young people face, I want to know, what are the ways the climate movement and the fights towards dismantling the patriarchy, how are they connected? And why should young people be involved in climate activism?
Thank you, Tivia. And you were mentioning climate change, but it's not only climate change, it's climate emergency. We are in a state of the emergency for climate. So you asked me the interlink between the climate emergencies and into the patriarchy. So I am connected on these issues. So I was a child rights activist. I was a child parliamentarian, and I was worked for campaigning for ending child marriage, stopping child marriage. So when I found the root cause, the child marriage, it was a poverty in the coastal areas, and poverty linked the climate-induced disaster, frequent disaster, like cyclone, like storms, deadly flood, and salinity, and many natural hazards. So natural calamities when attack the people, so its effects or its attacks is not same to rich and poor. Rich people can cope up, but poor people cannot cope with the frequent disaster in the most affected communities in the less developed countries and many countries like Bangladesh and other islands country. So the peoples or communities, they are taking a very sad coping strategy. One is child marriage. They want to cut their burden, and it root up, it connect with the child bride and violence and many things. And we saw the climate affected areas, emergencies area, violence against women is increasing and it's high rate. So who is the root cause for climate change? It's colonialism, it's patriarchy, it's hierarchy, So we should save our planet. We should save our, you mentioned, present and future, destroy patriarchy. So it's interlinked patriarchy and climate crisis in same, colonialism and capitalism and the climate crisis. So we should, so you have mentioned about the climate fight. So young people, especially Greta Thunberg, a Swedish girl, is fighting for our present and future. But global leaders are not hearing our voice. They're not, and they also sometimes betraying our future and present. But our peoples are killing, our ecosystem is collapsing. So violence against nature and women is same. So we should straightforward to stopping this type of violence, this type of crisis, So when we are fighting, we are not only fighting for climate justice, we are fighting for also gender justice, because we cannot achieve climate justice without gender justice. Other side, we cannot achieve gender justice without climate justice, So it's interlinked, and we should cross movement building among youth movement, among student movement, among civil movement, among LGBTQIA movements, among labor movement. So our enemies or our root cause is same. So we should young people fighting for their own presence, fighting for their future, fighting for their planet, and society is a violence-free society, and climate crisis is more inequality within existing inequality. So to removing these inequalities, to unequal power relation, we should more fighting for climate action. And we have no planet B. We have one planet, a planet. So we should preserve this planet and as a safer and violence-free environment for us. Thank you, Tivia.
Thank you so much, Sohan. And yes, it is a climate emergency. And I'm very grateful that you're able to do this work. And hopefully, of course, it's going to continue to translate based upon the other movements that are happening globally and create this climate resilient world that we as young people and those younger than us deserve. So coming now into the second part of today's youth plenary, we want to invite attendees. I see there are 132 attendees on Zoom, and many of you, of course, are joining in groups, so I know there are many more. We want to invite you to post questions in the chat for specific panelists or for all of the panelists to answer. And so questions, of course, are coming in. And so I have a question. I'm going to ask it. I'm going to throw it out to the 6 panelists. From Ange Marie, Ashlee, Abel, Sohan, Cesar, and Martin. And of course, if any of you are too shy, I'm going to do a little volunteering and get some of you to respond to me. Okay. So the first question is from Pamela in Chile. She is asking, how can we do effective work with youth from a masculinities lens, taking into account the rising backlash and the limitations imposed by the adult world? Do y'all want me to repeat the question? Yes? All right, I'll repeat it once more. How can we do effective work with youth from a masculinities lens, taking into account 1, the rising backlash, and 2, the limitations imposed by the adult world? So who's gonna attempt to go ahead first? Should I call? I'm gonna call. I'm just gonna go right ahead. And Abel, I'm gonna go straight to you because I know a lot of the work you do is actually focused on this. So go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a very great question, and it just come at the right time because there are so many challenges engaging young people in the community. The playing field is not that smooth. There are so many challenges because, as you know, it's a challenge around the world that the rate of unemployment is very high. So the moment you take a program in the community, young people perception is like they're going to benefit financially, or you're going to get them out of poverty without understanding that the knowledge you're going to impart with them will help them to change the world or to change their community. So that is a very big challenge. The moment you work in the community, you face those kind of challenges. And another challenge is on the cultural side that in some of the communities, young people, they don't see themselves as key stakeholders in some of the development in intervention in the community. But one of the opportunities which we have in the community, we normally work with local leaders, but also we find some influential and religious and traditional leaders and bring them on board. So the moment you bring them at the same table, young people feel like they are valued, but also they are respected, because it is not normal in some of the community to find young people sharing the same space with the decision makers, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and influential leaders. That is not the case in some of the community, because of some of the perspectives which have been created in the mind that young people are, they don't care about development, they don't care about they care about the style and what is happening in the community. So I think the easiest way to do that is to make sure that we don't work in isolation with other groups, important group in the community, such as religious leaders, traditional leaders, influential leaders, and local leaders, who can give you an entry point to meet with young people and training them and raise the awareness on gender equality and other matters which are supposed to support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abel. And the next question I'm actually going to pose to Ange Marie and Cesar. So Ange Marie, you can prepare and you could go next. The question is, and this question is from Kano. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but they're from Nigeria. And the question is, how do we promote youth leadership in our communities? How do we promote youth leadership within our communities? Go ahead, Ange Marie.
Thank you very much. In Rwanda, youth leadership is promoted. In the first line, the Rwandan government has introduced national youth councils from the village level to the cell sector, the district or municipalities, and the country level. And this, it has a great effect because we see also in our Rwandan parliament, we have two representatives, youth representative in the Rwandan parliament, the Chamber of Deputies. And also in the local government, we have also young leaders, young female and young men working in the development sectors. And the first thing that we can do to improve youth leadership is first we recognize their effort. First thing, they do volunteering services. For example, in Rwanda, we have the volunteering services they do in promoting the social development of the young Rwanda citizen. And I encourage that in other countries, we can have these national youth councils to just first thing to accept their effort they do in improving the standards of living the community, and also empower them, provide space for young people where their ideas are heard and their efforts are recognized, and better on as the generation goes on, they can be provided to upper levels and be decision makers like others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ange Marie. Cesar, the same question. How do we promote youth leadership in the community?
Creo que esa pregunta se relaciona a la primera que preguntó Pamela de Chile. Hay que reconocer a las comunidades como parte de a las juventudes como parte de las comunidades. Es importante eso, y que si bien son agentes de cambio, no hay que esencializar a las juventudes como únicamente agentes de cambio, sino que hay juventudes también que salían a grupos más conservadores, como se puede ver en muchos lados del mundo. Juventudes que de una u otra forma terminan estando en contra de lo que algunas personas estamos proponiendo, que es transformar el mundo. En ese sentido, creo que hay mucho por hacer respecto a las juventudes, no tengo una idea clara, pero creo que el dar espacio de diálogo a las demandas de las juventudes es muy importante, en el sentido de que no somos unos sujetos ahistóricos que de repente traemos demandas, sino que somos conscientes de los problemas de la sociedad desde pequeños, y ahora tenemos la oportunidad de levantar esa voz, por así decirlo. Y en la construcción de nosotros como sujetos sociales y personas que representan a una comunidad, vamos reconociendo los problemas y denunciando los diferentes problemas que existen desde el Estado, las voluntades políticas para la transformación de nuestras comunidades. En ese sentido, renuevo, es muy importante escuchar a las juventudes, darles voz y empoderarlas. Eso.
Thank you. And that's a very important point about letting young people speak and, you know, working as subjects within communities. Like we're not second class and we're not, you know, the second option, but that our opinions and our voice, they matter, and that they should be used to empower ourselves and to change the world around us. So thank you, Cesar. And of course, thank you, Ange Marie, as well. The next question I want to ask is from Theophile. And the question is, I'll read what the person says. They said, I totally agree that young people need to be involved in challenging negative stereotypes about masculinities and femininities. But my question is, what kind of mechanisms can be put in place to sustain the youth role in these endeavors? And I guess here what this question is particularly asking is about burnout and how can we, there's a bit of feedback, I'm sorry about that, but how can we sustain the work that young people are doing, right? So I'm gonna ask that question, of course, to Ashlee, and I'm also going to pose that question to Sohan, because you are both doing feminist activist work, particularly around changing gender norms, and Sohan around climate resilience and climate emergencies, and you must experience some burnout in that process. So how do we stop this? How do we keep sustaining ourselves to continue to do this work? Go ahead, Ashlee.
I've always been a firm believer in collaboration. There are several organizations across the world, you know, and even in your home country and in your region that does the same kind of work as you. And so when you're, you know, taking on such a mammoth task of transformation, it's so important to rely on others who are also specializing in those fields to take piece of it. So if everyone takes piece of that work, whilst that work might still be huge, it still lessens that burden. But it's also very important to realize, you know, as a person, I guess it's feedback, I'm not sure if it's on my end. It's very important as a person to realize and recognize how much you can do and be honest with that, because it's very easy to get caught up in, you know, wanting to save the world or wanting to, you know, improve the lives of others, but you can't improve the lives of others if your life is, you know, deteriorating as time goes by. So it's very important to rely on others. Collaboration is a major key, because, you know, sometimes a lot of organizations too believe that they kind of own the space or, you know, own a type of activism, and it kind of, you know, negatively impacts that collaboration, but still, you know, push through and collaborate and be honest with yourself as to what you are able to do.
Thank you, Ashlee. Sohan, go ahead.
Yes.
How do we? Yes, go ahead.
So we are working for a sustainable environment, but now you are asking for sustaining the movement, you know. So already Ashlee mentioned about collaboration, cooperation, and solidarity. So in climate emergency issues, we obey 3 A's. First A is a science, because we should believe, we should trust science, because science has crystal clear that climate emergency emerged and we have not enough time to fix it. But young people are leading in this. Second one is a solution. So apart movement, apart the advocacy issues, we should find solution and innovation strategies. And young people can find innovative solution, you know. And also solidarity issues with building allyship with many stakeholders. So when we start a climate justice campaign, is a grassroots in a coastal cities, but we get positive feedback from various stakeholders like non-government organizations, civil societies, UN agencies, and many more. So we can continue this for collaboration, cooperation, partnership through knowledge sharing, information sharing, and exploring new opportunities to sustaining the movement. Thank you, Tivia.
Thank you so much, Sohan. And Martin, the next question is for you. This is Struan Kennedy. They're asking, can you say something on how to overcome the stigma boys face when defending the rights and respect of girls and women? The stigma, for example, of being feminized, or unfortunately the slur of being gay, may prevent some boys from engaging in feminist work or even simply speaking out in support of women and girls.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and it's not a short answer as well. Well, a lot of those notions, you know, they come and originate and obviously in rooted homophobia or in societies, and how we also in sexism as well, about how we see femininity as a weakness, and you know, compassion, you know, empathy, so we associated those. I think it starts really early, and I saw another question as well, I think it links with this one, about when do we start challenging those notions. I think, you know, if we focus more on like on those qualities and values regardless of gender identity, you know, and relieve that pressure that, you know, no, you can be empathetic, you can care for others, you can be there for others, regardless of your gender identity, whether you're a man or a woman. And see other young people as leaders in your community. I think I've seen, like, I've worked here and in a few countries and back home in Bulgaria with young men and boys. And sometimes, you know, it's just stepping up as and saying, no, this is not okay, you know, to use that word. It is offensive. And also it's okay for me to step up and speak about women's rights and girls' rights, you know, and this is what a masculinity is for me, is to like to speak about injustices of others as well. And I think that young people learn from peers the best. And I think if we focus on peer education among other young people to challenge those constructs, right, to take away those toxic notions that we've built up around them, and see where they come from as well. It's a good way. But also we need to take into account that in different countries and different cultures works different things, and you have to find what are those positive attributes within, because I'm from a country that has hypertoxic masculine and sometimes feminine constructs and huge disparities. But if you look at them down, there are so many positive examples in society, and then you can pull that and focus on, no, actually, see, these are the good examples, these are the good role models that you can focus on as well, and they exist out there.
Thank you, Martin. I'm actually going to pose the exact question to Ashlee. I see you nodding your head profusely on your end. Do share, because I really do want to know what your thoughts are. And then the next questions are going to be for Ange Marie and Abel, a specific question based upon your continent. But Ashlee, I do want to know, how do we address the stigma, you know, when men and boys represent or, you know, attempt to work within the field of feminism?
Yeah. I think it goes, and as nodding a lot at what Martin said, because, you know, it's so spot on in understanding, firstly, before, you know, any of our identities, that we're human beings, and by virtue of being a human, you know, it's worth experiencing that care and caring for others. And so it's a lot of hard work, because of course in different regions the culture is different. So I can speak for the Caribbean specifically, where and I mean it's probably the same thing when it comes to different types of way that masculinity manifests, but you know, being that really, really hyper masculine way that you don't need care, you don't need to give care, and you know, it translates into relationships, it translates into the type of work, and we see it a lot online, the way that men engage other persons within the space, and even women, because they're not taught to care. A lot of the media that we consume, it definitely feeds into that. And so it really is about kind of going back to the drawing board. And it starts from even in school. And I know that a lot of my colleagues would have touched on that education, but they need to transform what that looks like and removing that binary and teaching that care isn't something that women need to primarily do. It's not a feminine trait, but rather it's a human trait. We're humans and we need to care for each other. And so it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of unlearning, and unlearning is something that you have to be willing to do. It doesn't just come like that. You don't just wake up and unlearn. You have to realize that the school of thought that you had is awfully wrong. And then you need to now consume the things to transform that. So it's a lot of hard work, but it's possible.
Thank you, Ashlee. Yes, excellent points. I'm sure we're all engaged in processes of unlearning in our work every single day. So the next question is for Ange Marie and Abel. The panelist, the attendee, Miriam Makum, asks, to what extent do you think youth identity has affected the youth movement and hindered youth from taking up their spaces in decision-making tables, especially in Africa? So how do you think youth identity has affected youth movement and hindered youth from taking up space in the decision-making tables in Africa? And of course, you can speak from your perspectives as people from Rwanda and from Tanzania. And of course, from if you do work throughout the continent as well, do feel free to share. So go ahead, Ange Marie.
Identity being like a hindrance of the youth involvement in taking decisions. Yes, of course, as young people, here in MenEngage, we take young people from 18 to 35. But in the 1820s, in African ideology, we believe that these young people lack experiences. They are not well equipped to take decisions. They have a less experience in decision making. And this identity of age, it hinders them being in positional leadership positions that take decisions and movement building. And my point is, being young in age doesn't mean that being young in mind. You can be young in age, but with a strong mind, with positive thinking and strong thinking also. And I think this cannot be a challenge to young people to involve in positions that take decisions. The age does not matter. What matters is what you have in mind and what you want also to do or to achieve, or what your contribution can be. And that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Age doesn't matter. It's what's in your mind and in your heart. I love that. Abel, go ahead. Take the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for me, the problem started at the family level. At the family level, and due to our tradition and customs that young people are not seen as contributors to the decision which are happening in the family level. Because when I was growing up, most of the decisions at the family level were taken by parents only. And when it comes for you to be engaged, it's when maybe you are told that this is the school fees, you have to go to school. But when parents are planning for the development of the family, they will kick you out of the room. Okay, you go out till we have something to talk with your mom. And when it's coming to the community meeting as well, young people were excluded because elders thought that young people, as it has been said by the previous speaker, that young people cannot give views, they lack education, they lack skills, they lack experience as well. But this is wrong. And this has led to lack of trust among many young people with a leadership position. But what we have done, for instance, as Restless Development, what we have done is that we trust young people have the power and the ability to make the community a better place. But what is needed is for them to be, their capacity to be built. They need their mind to be polished. Because it has been shared by one of the attendees from Pakistan that young people are now manipulated by TikTok and social media and other things. So how should we change that narrative to tell young people that you can use TikTok, you can use Facebook, you can use Twitter, You can use Instagram to develop your business idea, to sell your business, but also to advocate for the position of young people around the table. I think that is the narrative we have to change in the community, starting from the family level, that we should raise our kids to believe and to understand that they have a role to play in making decisions in the family level community, but also to ask young people to position themselves in the community as key stakeholders and not the beneficiary. Because one of the challenges we are facing in the African context is that young people are putting themselves at the back benches instead of moving at the front seat and lead changes in the community. And by that way, it's when adults and leaders see young people as nothing instead of something in the community. Thank you so much.
Abel, you're absolutely correct. And that feeds into the next question. And I'm going to ask this question to all of the panelists. But I don't know if it happens throughout the globe, but at least in my part of the world, I'm sure it does. You hear when you're on your phone all the time, the older ones, the elderly, your parents are telling you you're wasting time, not knowing that young people are building movements online. And our phones, even though we can't seem to put them down, our phones is a part of the revolution. I don't know if all of you agree with me, but our phones are a revolution. And so I want to ask that question. I want to ask this question, and this question is from Rodrigo, and they're asking, how can we foster a youth leadership that does not repeat or replicate the mistakes of the past and the power dynamics of the past? And this is based upon, they're talking about the bureaucracies that we know that we don't like sometimes, and the challenges that occur in traditional organizing. So how can we as young people not repeat those mistakes? And I want to start with Cesar. So Cesar, go ahead. How can we not repeat the mistakes of those from the past? Cesar, I would invite you to start. I think you have to unmute, yes.
Sí, ¿puedes repetir la pregunta? Tuve un problema de conexión y no escuché la pregunta completa.
No problem. So I'm going to repeat the question. Can you hear me now? Okay, so the question is, okay, good. So the question is, how can we foster a youth leadership that does not repeat or replicate the mistakes of the past? How can we, not repeat the mistakes of those that have gone before us as young people?
Yo creo que un problema identificable es la institucionalización de nuestras demandas, de las demandas de las juventudes. Hemos visto que en la política y el espacio público, las demandas siempre pasan a ser negociadas con muchas personas. Parece inevitable, pero creo que de parte de las juventudes tenemos que cambiar eso y decir que las demandas que reclamamos no son políticas, sino son de dignidad y de derechos humanos. En ese sentido, la institucionalización es un problema que identificaría por un lado, y el segundo es terminar con la idea adultocentrista de que uno llega a la adultez y ya no puede hacer nada porque es parte de un sistema que te explota y para el que tienes que trabajar, sino entender que cuando, como lo que dijeron, no importa la edad, sino las ganas de transformar y construir un mundo más justo para nuestras comunidades y para todos y todas. En ese sentido, desde la masculinidad creo que es muy importante entender que las demandas que plantean los compañeros y compañeras no son solo necesario articularlas, sino hacer un activismo de parte de nuestras posiciones. Nosotros planteamos que es importante redistribuir el trabajo doméstico, por ejemplo, para que las mujeres sean parte del espacio público y redistribuir los espacios de representación también para que las mujeres y hombres, otras identidades no binarias, puedan llevar sus demandas también a los espacios de discusión de todos y todas. Creo que es muy importante reconocer que el espacio público está muy masculinizado y por lo mismo los problemas que se traen a la mesa en este espacio suelen repetirse y repetirse, pero en cuanto escuchemos las voces de identidades no binarias, LGTBIQ o mujeres, vamos a poder hablar de una verdadera transformación. Eso es todo.
Yes, and I really like that what you said, that it is about our dignity and it is about our human rights. I really do appreciate that. And the space that we do work in is very masculinist. So we have to create spaces, you know, that allow us to create change. I really do appreciate that, Cesar. Sohan, I want to ask you the question next. You know, how can we not replicate, you know, the power dynamics of traditional organizing and of those from the past? You know, how can we do better as young people?
So I think we young people should change our, and we also, you know, inherit, we are doing great. So we should do better from our previous generation, you know. So new organizational terms should more caring, more responsible, and not practicing harmful power or, you know, destructive power. And I think it would be great to engage more young people on this matter. And I think organization, NGOs should change their traditional mindset as youth as the foot soldier, but young people should take in as a change agent and not on the road for fighting, striking. And young people should bring in the decision-making table. So we will, by our advocacy, in our process, we will be included in the decision-making process and will change the system, because we should change the system to ensure gender justice, climate justice, and wider social justice too. Thank you.
Change the system, change the system. I love that, Sohan. Ange Marie, I'm going to invite you to contribute now.
Thank you very much. The do is easy, or what to do is easy, so that we cannot continue with that odd mind. And it's simple. We can tell young people that with time has proved that everything is fine, or female also, or women are capable. For example, let us take 3 examples. In education, we have female students in STEM sciences, which to them and better than also men. At home, we have homes that female are the bread givers, and the home are in a better condition of living. And the decision-making levels, we have female leading international organizations, and they're doing a great job. And it is easy. How can we foster this youth leadership without domestic or old thinking? Is to prove to young people that the old thinking or the old understanding, science or time has proved that it is wrong, because everything is okay. Female also are capable of doing anything that men also do. And they do, I said they do is easy. To prove them that female also are capable of doing anything, through trainings, through workshops, providing them spaces where they can hear these experiences, where they can be informed of this transformation. And I think my point is that, and thank you, Tivia, for that question.
Thank you, Ange Marie. Martin, same question. How do we not repeat and replicate the power dynamics of traditional organizations? How do we not repeat the mistakes of those before us?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that's the question that excites you, and that's the question that we really like and asking ourselves. I think it all starts from what is wrong, really. I think we really need to know what exactly is wrong. and like and go in depth and in details. What didn't work, what is not working, and speaking about, because we sometimes we're also like victim of using those words, but like, you know, but we don't really like break them down what they mean. You know, when we talk about, you know, toxic masculinity construct, patriarchy, and we talk about, you know, like system changes, but what do we really mean? You know, like what exactly we mean, and breaking those down. And I think we need to like stop for what we can change is not work in silos, but truly, like, you know, actually work with others and bring them in, not just use again collaboration. You know, it's just like as those words that have again become platitudes and don't have any meaning. And I think the danger of like young people joining in this field and becoming careerists and using words for the sake of them is very big, and repeating the same mistakes is quite often. And I think a very big part of it is that systematic change that needs to happen. But again, what are the steps, what are the issues that underneath we need to recover, and demand the space from others, from the other leaders. If they cannot step up, I like this quote, I heard it at the Nairobi summit from someone said, if they can't step up, if you can't lead, if you can't follow our work, get out of the way.
Woo, Martin, thank you. Yes, I love that. And I must admit, I'm very guilty of using these phrases, toxic masculinity and heteropatriarchy sometimes. And the people that I want to engage with, they have no clue what I'm talking about. And so that I do think is something we as young people need to work on, and change that, because if we want to reach people, we need to reach people where they are. That's the only way change is going to happen. So Ashlee, I want to invite you into all of the conversations that have been covered so far, all of the areas. Still, I want to know, particularly, from the perspective of the region and the Caribbean and even globally, how can we not repeat the mistakes of the past?
Yeah. I'm so like, Martin, your energy, like I felt it, and I'm just so excited to answer this question. So thank you. You made a really good point, Tivia, and it's something that I always say to myself. I'm a really simple person, I think, and I use a lot of simple language simply because some words are just so hard to even understand, and even saying it is just so weird. And so it's been something that I've been thinking about and even trying to, academia is different for when you're actually trying to get your degree or something. There's certain language you have to use. And there's a time actually I was told my language wasn't sophisticated enough. And I just said, oh, okay. But moving on to answering the question, the young people of today and tomorrow and who will come after us will be responsible for designing the policies for, instituting the different types of systems and stuff that will serve us and serve others. And I think the most important thing, and it's just one word, is love. I was reading this book called Emergent Strategy, and that book, I haven't even gotten too far into it, but the first couple of pages were just so impactful. And it really speaks about having love at the center of organizing will change everything. Because a lot of times we become so disconnected from the cause, because, as activists, and I'm pretty sure this is something that's global, it transcends culture. But sometimes people believe that activism, it's really embedded in the savior complex. And so you're trying to save someone rather than help, rather than, because it's really you also that's being assisted in that. And so if things are transformed in a way where love becomes the center, then of course you're going to care about it. You're not going to do this for gain, for yourself, to be praised, but it's really, really about the cause. And I feel like that is the thing that has to happen. That's the thing that I feel that is so different from those that have gone before us, because I can see from even the government in Trinidad, and governments come and go. There's a huge disconnect from the people. They're in whatever nice compounds that they live in and having access to all the things, but there's a disconnect from the people, and that lack is love. And so if we can institute love into everything that we do, and it's not hard, it just, you have to care about it. I don't think anyone should be doing work they don't care about, because when it becomes having to work extra hours for the cause, and you're not getting, because activism work, it doesn't pay, right? It doesn't pay. right? And a lot of people think so because they get to fly out. But when it comes where you don't get paid for the work, you're going to give up. And people are going to suffer because you are not contributing in the way that you should. You're not being that puzzle piece that fits in to ensure that everything is whole. And so love has to be at the center. Do the work if you care about it.
Love. That's a very bell hooks of you, Ashlee. So yes, I know that book quite well, all about love. So very, very, very informative. And so Abel, I'm going to ask you to close off this question for us. And I hope you're going to, give us what we need to keep going forward as young people. How can we not repeat the mistakes of the past?
Thank you so much. So now we are talking about the future is female. But we are not talking about the past was female, because there are something in the past which was holding female back from being at the center of the community development. And unless we change those narratives and we molded the system, it will be very hard to keep saying that the future is female, because we are not using the past to build the future, which is female, but we should learn from what happened in the past, what was pulling women back in the past in order to build the future, which is female. And what should we do is that we should, first of all, we should advocate for policy change, because we have policies which are not favoring the empowerment and gender equality in the community. For instance, in the case for Tanzania, in some of the communities, women are not allowed to own land. They are allowed to access land, but when they access land, they produce, they're not allowed to, they don't have any say on the produce. But also, totally, they're not allowed to own land. If you want to change that and to make sure that the future is female, we should advocate for the change in policies, but also for the policies which are protecting and safeguarding the rights and the freedom of women and girls. We should advocate for their full implementation. We have, for instance, in Africa, we have like a gender strategy, AU gender strategy, we have the SDG 5, we have our local laws which are protecting women and girls. Are they implemented fully? That's the problem. But another thing, as I said before, we have the large group of young people in the community. How are we capitalizing on that youth generation? How are we investing on the program which will grow their understanding, which will develop their leadership, in order to be at the table and advocate for gender equality? For instance, I can give you one example. When I started working for Restless development in the rural communities, young people were like, gender equality is not our thing, community development is not our thing. Why? Because they didn't have that knowledge, ability to understand that we are part and parcel of the community. We will benefit when women and girls have the same opportunity, rights as us. And now, after we train them, we educate them. Some of them are part of the social welfare and community development committees. And now I'm going to tackle the question about the sustainability. So in order to ensure the sustainability of youth movement, we should advocate for their seat at the table. Because the moment they have the seat at the table, they feel part and parcel of the community. Their voices are heard out, but their voices are acted upon. And that way we can create the future which is female and not harboring in the past, which is always pulling women back and the community at large. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And, we're going on now to the last half an hour of this youth plenary. And of course, there's some enriching conversations. I have a question here from Yvonne from the Netherlands. Now, this question was posed to Martin, but I'm going to also invite Martin, Ange Marie, and Sohan to answer this question. So Martin, the question is, what would be the first 3 steps to work on to break down toxic masculinity and to also leave that jargon behind? What would be the first 3 steps that we could work on to end and, to leave toxic masculinity behind?
Great question. Yes, I think one of the first steps will be to stop using those toxic masculine words that we all familiar with and that we hear from, like, that we tell boys, man up, stop crying, don't be and don't use those words that really offensive to women as well, are sexist and rooted down in homophobia, and they're so normalized in our language that we sometimes don't even notice them. I still remember that my experience going back home and hearing some of the songs that I grew up with and listening them back and realizing, how come I listened to those songs and I didn't really realize how toxic they are? And I think stopping that language is the first step. And it's not using the words to tell let kids be kids, and regardless of their gender identity and regardless of how they express themselves. Second will be role models. Choose people to follow that are positive regardless of gender, and whether they want to empathize with. And three, I would say is get involved with communities to work and step up the game to break those injustices. But I'll leave it to all the others because, well, I'm sure you will have other things to add.
Thank you, Martin. Ange Marie?
Is the community mindset change about masculinity. And then in this form, I can say that the community can be given awareness on reducing men superiority over female. That when the community can be aware that men, women are equal. That's the first thing. And the second thing is generational education, educating young and not old generation about gender equality and positive masculinities. And the third thing is accepting youth leadership in changing this community ideology or this community mindset on gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ange Marie. Sohan, three steps towards changing the patriarchy and toxic masculinity.
Previous speaker already told 336 steps already. So I will add that we should focus on our family, our parents. So in our family culture, we will pressurize to be a man. And already Martin told man does not cry or like this. So it is a pressure to be a man, be a like kid like this. So don't pressurize. To build your son or daughter is a human, not real man or real woman. It's first thing. Second thing is education. Already my friends from Rwanda mentioned it. So our education system, like my countries, so it's stereotypes like men's work, women's work like this, and many thought that women cannot, men can, and like stereotypes all times. Man is will be on a job, women will be work on household chores like this, and many words in government structure. Our curriculum is not gender friendly, and it's became influence men, young men to be masculinity is not problem, but it's turned to toxic. And third one is that we should honor, or we should all peoples have dignity. All men's and women's, trans, and all peoples has human dignity. So when we divide them into men, women, and also caste, culture, race, religion, divide, and division, it's create more, discrimination in your know. So at first we should count every people as a human being with their dignity, with human dignity. Over to you, Tivia. Thank you.
Thank you. And so with about 25 minutes, give or take, left, I want to ask this last question to all the panelists. And I'm pretty sure this question is going to take us up to the hour. So the question is, and I'm going to expand upon this question. So this question comes from Rita from South Africa, and I'm going to add in a part at the end. Rita asks, in an ideal world, what kind of youth leadership would you like to see? And I would add a part two to that question. And how are you working to create that world in your own organizations? So the question is, in an ideal world, what type of youth engagement and youth leadership would you like to see? And how have you been working on creating that world? And I'm going to start with Abel.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, the kind of leadership, youth leadership I want to see is the leadership where young people are leading changes in the community. Leading changes, I mean that they are standing at the front and center of making the community a better place. And what am I doing right now to make this happen is at Restless Development, we are our mission is to see young people carrying the banner of development in the community. And but we know that they cannot do that fully because they lack skills, they lack exposures, they lack ability to do that. So what we are doing, through different interventions, we go to the community, we build young people's capacity, we change their narrative that they can do wonders in the community. Because one of the challenges which young people are facing now is they don't trust themselves first. First, they don't trust on their ability. But another thing, there is lack of trust among community members and community members themselves, but also decision makers that young people can amplify, can multiply changes in the community. So first of all, we change young people's perception that young people have the power. You have the power. You have to use that power to drive positive changes in the community. And when we finish changing that mindset, we go to the community. We change the mindset of the community as well, that young people need to be given a chance. Because we were talking about the past, and we are not want to live the past. That young people were looked at people who did not have trust in the community. So we ask people to give them the chance to deliver, the chance to move changes, the chance to make sure that they are taking lead to various changes. But one of the interesting things we are doing now, we are running youth-led accountability project in the community, where we are building the capacity of young people to conduct data-driven accountability. Because we know that one of the gaps in the achievement of gender equality is the lack of real-time data. There is no real-time data in the community. So even decision makers cannot make a decision without having the data, without knowing where the gaps are. So what we are doing, we are building young people's capacity to conduct data-driven accountability and to hold the dialogue with decision makers in order for young people to push the recommendation, but for the decision makers to heed to the recommendation of the young people and implement some of the policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Abel. And I'm going to go next to Cesar. Cesar, in an ideal world, what youth leadership would you like to see, and how have you been working on changing this?
Creo que en un mundo ideal, la articulación sería clave y podríamos tener diferentes liderazgos juveniles, en el sentido de que hayan liderazgos donde estén representados hombres, mujeres, personas que representan a la comunidad trans, personas que representan a la comunidad LGBTI, personas, no sé, me imagino como un escenario donde estamos conversando nosotros, solo que con mayor poder económico para hacer cambios en la sociedad. En ese sentido, creo que debería apostarse por una perspectiva interseccional de reconocimiento de problemas, entendiendo que cada comunidad está afectada por diferentes problemas y diferentes opresiones. Por ejemplo, en Chile, el problema del sistema neoliberal se ha visto más visible desde el año pasado, y es un problema latinoamericano también, que estamos atravesados por una opresión económica y de raza. Imagino que en los países africanos pasa lo mismo. Entonces, la articulación a partir del reconocimiento de nuestras opresiones es muy importante en ese sentido. Sí, sería eso. Imagino también que en un escenario ideal podríamos ser como agentes de cambio con poder de decisión a favor de nuestras comunidades y de todos y todas las jóvenes. Espero que pase pronto y bueno, creo que esto es una contribución para poder construir ese mundo ideal. Gracias.
Thank you, Cesar. I hope it happens soon. And I must say, soon as well. And I must say your work in the Anti-Patriarchal Assembly of Men in Santiago has really, I did my research and it really has blown my mind. So thank you so much for all the work and that contribution as well. So I'm going to go next to Ashlee. Ashlee, in an ideal world, what kind of youth leadership would you like to see and how have you been working on creating it?
So in the ideal world, I think, youth leadership takes on that transformational leadership approach where it starts from self first, because it's a hard thing for you to want to create a big change if you yourself, is homophobic, transphobic, and has sexist ideals. And so that transformation begins from within, where you realize the different things that you're trying to change and change that first, and then you move on to changing the world. And so it looks a lot like that meaningful participation. We receive that from our government, where we are actually included. I really believe in having quotas, not for the idea of being tokenized, because I think there's a good way to do it, in that there's a quota for the amount of women that's in parliament, the amount of young women, young people that's in parliament, and at the seat of decision making. Because oftentimes, here in Trinidad and Tobago, I think you have to be at least 25 years old to make it into the Senate. And there are so many young people who are from like 20 years old to 25 that are doing so much work that are able to be at that seat. And so it's also looking at our systems and the guidelines that we have put in place to ensure that youth can actually be a part and then actually listen to their contributions and take it in and not just have it there. Because a lot of people do these consultancies with youth. I was a part of a consultancy recently where they were trying to, work on our youth policy. And it bothered me to know that this is just something to say we consulted the youth, but not even take our recommendations into the youth policy. And how I am working to ensure that's an ideal world. I believe also in a bottom-up approach where, yes, there's leadership, but the leadership is just there to kind of guide and to just, execute what has been discussed and has been, formed. And so even at CWIL, the Caribbean Women Leadership, where I serve as the chair for the Tobago National Chapter and a board member for the regional, that is our school of thought, bottom up, where we allow the membership, we allow those that we serve to be a part of the conversation, to help let us know what they need, and we now use our resources to ensure that they are taken care of. And even there at Feminitt, while I'm the founder, there's no hierarchy. Everyone is working together to ensure that everything gets done. And I think that's super, super important in transforming the world. And that's what my ideal world with youth leadership looks like.
Thank you, Ashlee, and congratulations again on your work with Feminitt. I really do think it's transforming the lives of young people and a feminist organization within the Caribbean. So thank you for that. Sohan, how is it within an ideal world we can create particular types of youth leadership, and how are you doing it?
Yes, Tivia. So you are want to know about me about ideal world or ideal planet, but you know we are the first generation who are facing compound multiple crises, and not only crisis is type of pandemic, you know, COVID-19 one. Second one, shadow pandemic, gender-based violence. You know, even declared violence against women is a shadow pandemic. In lockdown, in isolation, the gender-based violence raised. In Bangladesh, not only women and girls, also boys in madrasas, in schools, religious schools, boys, children are also raped, is a huge number. So in COVID-19, we are dealing with a shadow pandemic, and also is a before declared global climate emergencies. So it's last chance. We are last generation also to tackle this, and also economic crisis, social crisis, you know, but it is a triple high number or greatest challenge which we should tackle, and I believe we can fix out this for a ideal, not only ideal planet, it will be just, equitable, and it will be a violence free a planet. And I believe not only change, we will bring transformation through our transformative leadership, through our accountable leadership. We will connect the disconnected people who are in the most affected communities. We will raise the unreached people. We will hear, we will amplify those voices who are unheard. So I think through this leadership, we can we can build that ideal planet for everyone, not for me, not for men, not for women, not for trans or LGBTQ, for all people, all kind of people. Thank you, Tivia.
Thank you, Sohan. Martin, what, if you could create or be in an ideal world, what kind of youth leadership would you like to see? And personally, how have you been working to transform it?
Thank you. I mean, most of them have said it really well so far as well. Like, so I'm just gonna build upon what was said. For me, like, I think, especially as a queer movement, I think we're just at very early stages to see something on a global level as well. Where we are now, we've started amazing work. We're working with other regional networks, queer youth networks such as the African Queer Youth Initiative, Igloo, Youth Voices Count in Asia and Pacific, and many others to form a new global queer youth network. And we are in the beginning of that, and it's really exciting. But the ideal scenario is that this, it's replicated all across. And we're seeing what was mentioned earlier is that especially those communities that have been sidelined for too long, such as trans, intersex community, gender diverse people, non-binary young people, and others have like the space and capacity to advocate for their rights fully, not only on local and national level, but on global level for their rights, speak on themselves for their issues, not also relying on other movements or other people within our movement to speak about them. So that the ideal scenario is that we value those leaders and give them the space and the safe space and platform for them to engage and speak up about their rights. And an overall thing as well is that ideal scenario is the youth leadership is just leadership, I think. And it's, and we are just respected as any other acknowledged leaders. And youth is just one identity of us. It's just one aspect. But we are recognized as experts in our fields, as community leaders, as decision makers, as as researchers, as activists, as whatever you say it is. United under one umbrella is to fight all injustices across the field and create a safer and more sustainable planet for everyone.
Thank you, Martin. Ange-Marie, if you would be in an ideal world, what kind of youth leadership would you like to see? And how personally have you been working on creating this?
Thank you very much. And in an ideal world, youth leadership that I imagine can be that youth leadership should be that leadership which is inclusive. that leadership which is transformational, and that leadership with young people being accountable. And specifically in Rwanda, in our country, we have a yearly event which is called Youth Meet the President. Young people all over the country meet His Excellency President of the Republic of Rwanda and discuss about the challenges that young people are facing in participating in activities that improve that lead to the sustainable development of the country and that improve the standards of living of Rwandans. And that's the first thing that the Republic of Rwanda has done. And specifically, as an organization, I told you that I'm the Youth Engagement Program Coordinator in the Citizen Voice and Actions. As an organization, we have two great things that are great. The first thing we do, we have introduced spaces in the local level, at the sector level. Though we implement in 2 districts and in 4 different sectors, there are spaces where young people meet, they discuss about the issues that are affecting their lives and the lives of the people living in that area, and their ideas or their recommendations are taken to the local leaders and they are taken into consideration. And the third thing, we have a national youth policy dialogue at national level. We bring young people from all different districts and sectors. They come with their ideas and meet with decision makers. There are also challenges that young people face in contributing to the sustainable development of Rwandan people is discussed there, and the ideas are taken into consideration. As the organization, that are the 2 main things that we are doing, and as a country, we have that event of Youth Meet the President. And in the ideal world, and I think that youth leadership should be that leadership which is accountable, inclusive, transformational, and thus leading to the society to better standards of living. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ange Marie. Powerful words. And I'm gonna ask our panelists one more round because we do have 10 minutes of time left. And this really, I want you to do this in a sentence for me. And I'm gonna start with Abel. The question is, what is your final message that you want to leave with the 136 attendees that we have today, specifically around youth empowerment, youth engagement, and youth leadership? In a sentence or 2, what are the final thoughts that you want to leave with the participants today? Abel?
Yeah, thank you so much. What I can say, it's the time for generation equality now. It's the time for intergenerational movement toward the achievement of gender equality. We cannot achieve gender equality in isolation of one sex or one group in the community. We need a joint voice in order to realize the achievement of gender equality. And I will urge every young person who is listening to me, who is watching this, that we have a generation equality campaign happening in the community now. They can find information in the UN Women website and social media and join forces, because through this movement is placing young people at the center of realization of gender equality, because without young people, it will be impossible to achieve gender equality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abel. Thank you for ending on that note. Cesar, what is your final message to the symposium participants? 134 people right now are online. What is your final message to them around youth engagement, youth empowerment, youth leadership?
Ya. Yo creo que actualmente el liderazgo juvenil tiene que ser transformador y revolucionario, entendiendo que el futuro ya es feminista, el presente también, pero hay que hacernos cargo de que efectivamente ese futuro se mantenga feminista. Como en los hombres específicamente, redistribuyendo los trabajos de cuidado reproductivo, los trabajos de cuidado reproductivo, para que las mujeres tengan mayor participación en los espacios públicos y puedan hacer presente su voz. Asimismo, llamar a que los hombres derribemos la masculinidad. Yo creo que la masculinidad es tóxica de por sí y es como una arenga que nosotros levantamos. La masculinidad debe derribarse para construir un futuro inclusivo en el que la representación de todos sea posible. Y les invito a todos a formar parte. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Cesar. Let's deal with toxic masculinity, Martin. I know it's your favorite term at this point, but let's critique it. Let's transform. Let's also look, as much as the future is female. I like what you said, Cesar. As much as the future is female, let's address and deal with the challenges that exist within our society, based upon issues of reproductive care, etc. So thank you so much, Cesar. Sohan, your final message to the participants.
My final message is change yourself, inner self, first one. And we should change yourself, transform the society, and hear unheard voice to build a safer, secure, green planet, everyone, and celebrate diversity and honor with every people with human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohan. Celebrate diversity and change yourself. I love that message. Ashlee, what is your message to the symposium participants, particularly around youth leadership and youth engagement, etc.?
Okay, so let me wrap it up quickly. So it's very, very important to rely on those who have gone before. So ensure that you have an intergenerational conversation. Understand that you, just like Sohan said, you have to work on yourself first before you work on a movement. Both things can happen at the same time, but ensure that you take care of yourself also. And the last thing, do everything with love. Have love at the center of all of your work.
Love and change and transformation, the messages that are coming out from the 4 young people who've spoken so far. Martin, what is your message to the participants as we wrap up this amazing youth plenary?
My message is to support our movements, our youth movements, to redefine what masculinity in leadership is. For us to do that, to recognize our diversity within diversity, move beyond the binary, and name the systematic issues, be specific what they are, be bold, and put the most underrepresented and sidelined communities at the forefront of the conversation of masculinities. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I love the idea of centering young people, especially the ones from intersectional groups of oppression. Excellent point. And it is only fitting that we conclude with a voice from Rwanda, from where it is live and where the symposium is happening from. And we are honored, Ange Marie, to have you to give your final words for the youth plenary session today. What is your words right now for the symposium participants, all of those in front of you and the 138 that are online right now, and especially around youth leadership and youth engagement? Please take it away.
Tivia, and my final message is being young in age doesn't matter. Your age doesn't describe how mature enough how mature you are enough to take action into changing or into promoting these positive masculinities. As my president, His Excellency Paul Kagame, said, being young is not enough. You have to invest in new skills, knowledge, and experiences that will help you to tackle challenges that the world is challenging you. Then, providing knowledge, skills, and giving experience to young people will help the whole community into facing these negative masculinities, and it will encourage their work into promoting gender equality and having an inclusive society and in having an accountable youth leadership. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Ange Marie, and thank you to Ashlee and Martin and Sohan and Abel and Cesar. We really today appreciated this 2-hour session. You know, I'm a part of the youth committee for the Ubuntu Symposium, and this really was an honor for us to pull this together, to have all 6 of you contribute. And, you know, I see in the chats all the reflections coming in from people like Laban, you know, thinking through the politics within their country, and Miriam from Zambia, you know, thinking through what it means to have a progressive discussion, and Jean-Baptiste from Rwanda, you know, wondering about grassroots level organizing, and even Paul from Nigeria talking about masculinities and femininities. We see all of these in conversations, and we encourage you, all of our participants, you have our names, we're all on social media, of course. You will also have access to our email addresses. If you Google us, our email addresses are all online. We want to work together with all of you to create the world that everyone has just spoken about, a world that is transformative, and a world that centers the ideas and realities of young people towards a better tomorrow. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here, all 138 of you. The numbers are very important. And I hand over now to Reddy, who's going to continue to guide you through the program for the rest of the day. Have a good one, everyone. Goodbye from the youth plenary session.
Oh, thank you so very much. I could listen to you for another 2 hours. Really powerful conversations, powerful and challenging issues that you put on the table. And I think that that's what these communities ought to do. It shouldn't just be a meeting of like-minded people. We should challenge each other as well. What resonated with me, I think it was Martin who said that we need to move beyond the platitudes, because we use these terms as thinkers and activists and speakers in this field, but they're often repeated and they lose their meaning. What do we actually mean by toxic masculinity? What are the case studies? What interventions will speak to that? So that's very important. I also love the powerful commentary about the value and importance of intergenerational conversations, because we are changing the world for all of humanity, for all people. You don't lose relevance because you are older, but at the same time, we need to create space for young people to demonstrate their leadership, because clearly from this conversation and many others, young people are not just preoccupied with being young. They are affected by the same dysfunctions that have defined life in the world for so many years, and we heard quite strongly, invoking and bringing in other themes towards gender justice. That the climate crisis, the climate emergency that we are in, we know who's most vulnerable and is at the receiving end of these challenges. It's mainly Black communities, poor communities, and by extension, women in these communities as well. And what else stood up for me? Oh, I did want to mention something. There's a message that came through while you were speaking, and it takes me to that theme that I mentioned when I started my commentary, that these are spaces where we are going to challenge each other to undo some of the damage, to unlearn some of the practices, to literally extricate ourselves from some of the systems to which we have assimilated. And one of them that was particularly challenging to me, I can't remember where it came from. It came in about an hour and a half ago, that perhaps we ought not to say that the future is female or it's feminist. That it supposes that is an ideal that is far off, that is in the future, that can be deferred or delayed. This person suggested quite emphatically that feminism is now. Being female, being a woman, and the agency that comes with that is now, and it's not something that can be deferred to the future. But I think for as long as we've all been in this field, we understand the goodwill that is meant with all of this. It simply means that we can't do things the way we used to do them in the past. But it is great to be reminded that we're not talking about something that's yet to come. We must talk about something that requires doing, and requires doing now, and acknowledging the changes that women have already made in our societies today. So thank you all so much, and Tivia, for your expert moderating of that very, very crucial panel. Thank you so much.